Neil, and I am the CEO of the South Africa organization. And I just wanted to say how honored we are to have you here today. You're not going to be hearing much from me, but just to talk about why we're here today for a second is, of course, we all remember the very famous question from Professor on the finale of Miss South Africa that Ndavi answered so beautifully. And really, her entire campaign this year, her entire reign is built around bettering education in the country. So we're going to tell you a little bit today about how we're going to do that, along with some of our partners, Forever New, Adopt a School Foundation, the Silver Mapuza Education Trust, as well as all the gorgeous school children, women, girls in the room, which I'm really honored for you to be here. So without further ado, let's have a look at what today is really about.
We cannot say that we are moving forward as a nation while half of the country is still getting left behind. 50% of our country is still living below the poverty line, and it is our responsibility to ensure that we create a sustainable, innovative, and most importantly, an inclusive South Africa so that we can unlock opportunities for our youth. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ndavi Nokeri.
Hello everyone, my name is Ndavi Nokeri and I am Miss South Africa 2022. I owe my considerable success in life, every choice that I make and every opinion that I give, to the excellent education that I have been privileged to have had. Not everyone is as lucky as I have been. Segregation during the dark years of apartheid meant that not everyone was afforded an equal education, and it is time to make things right. That is why I am devoting the year of my reign to leveling the playing fields so that every individual receives the education that they deserve. I have called my campaign EduNite, and I want it to be a vehicle that will drive us towards reducing the educational inequality in our country. I want to raise 6 million rand within the next few months to begin to implement this change. Nelson Mandela once said, "Education is the most powerful weapon that you can use to change the world." Education changed my life, and I want it to change every other learner's life. Through EduNite, I will pair schools desperately in need of help with big corporations searching to make a difference. Together, we will repair infrastructure, equip schools with classrooms, tools, resources for digital exposure to ensure that there's connectivity for everyone, including learners in rural areas. Already, EduNite has partnered with the Adopt a School Foundation, a non-profit organization that supports the creation of a conducive learning and teaching environment in disadvantaged schools. I have also partnered with Forever New, a company that has pledged 600,000 rands for sanitary pads to end period poverty, which we know has a huge impact on the dignity of women and has caused many girls to miss out on valuable learning time due to their period. We need to raise these funds and to do so quickly. I call on corporate South Africa to join me and change the future of as many young people through the disruption of the educational space in our country. Help me help them by providing expertise, information, resources, or financial assistance. Together, we can close that gap. We have the power to ensure that learners and teachers get what they need. So let us work together to educate and unite through EduNite.
Thank you. So without further ado, let's welcome the lady of the day, Miss South Africa 2022, Ndavi Nokeri.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am super excited. I can't believe this day has finally arrived. We are finally launching EduNite, and you get to witness this firsthand. So thank you so much for coming today. This is one of the biggest days of my journey. So thank you for being a part of this day. So give yourself a round of applause. So Age Unite started quite a long time ago. It's something that I've been passionate about for a very long time, and I never quite imagined that this would be where I launched it, in a room with such incredible people. I'm very passionate about education, and for me that starts with my story. I think that our stories are so powerful, and mine is of a girl who grew up in two worlds. So I come from a village called Gabaza in Limpopo, but I was so privileged to be able to go to schools outside of the village. But because of that, I was able to see the difference between the education that I was getting versus my peers back at home. I really could see that there is a huge and unfair divide in South Africa in the quality of the education that we get. So I believe that having experienced both worlds has really positioned me to merge the two worlds, which is why we're here today. I want to say thank you so much to Forever New, who has already placed 600,000 rands towards this campaign to ending period poverty, because we know that girls cannot go to school if they do not have their dignity, if they do not have the things that they need to be able to focus and concentrate in classes. So thank you so much for that. We have also already partnered with the Adopt a School Foundation as well as CRET, who will be helping us to really have access to all the schools that have these needs that we are going to stand in the gap in and give them the necessary resources. So I want to say thank you to our partners. I'm sure we're going to make so many more partners that we will work with and walk the journey with going forward, because this is not a one-man show. We cannot do it alone, but if we stand together, we can really make a success out of it. So I am super excited, and without further ado, I'm going to welcome my esteemed panel. We are here to have a conversation today. So even as the guest, feel free to engage. If you have an opinion that you want to share, feel free to share that, because that is why we're here today. We all may come from different backgrounds, but some of our challenges are similar. Some challenges we may be not aware about, and we can get to address that here on this stage. So firstly, I have to welcome my special guest. All my guests are special, but this one is even more special because she gave me that very tough question, and I was saying to her that it could have gone both ways. It could have been a disaster or a really good answer because of the weight of the question. And so I want to welcome our professor here, Tuli Madonsela. And our next panelist, I would like to welcome to the stage the BITS SRC President, Sibole Nkosi. Thank you so much. Okay, next up we have Kadweko Hermanes from Rand Girls High. And next up, we have Shandai Dupriya from Halmagod High School. Okay, thank you. Please join us. Yeah. Next up, we have Anya van Jashveld, also from Halmagod High School. Also on our panel today is Sihle Sitole from CRET. She is also a graduate and current Fordham University candidate in New York. Next up, I had the honor of meeting her yesterday actually at one of our events. We have Charmaine Kalele from St. Anne's High School. And next up on our panel is Asande, also from St. Ansgar High School. Hi, Mr. President. And that is us for now. So I'm going to be taking my seat, and we're just going to start with the conversation. I'm going to start with Prof because I'm such a big fan, first of all. Prof, we know that South Africa currently has the highest inequality worldwide, and I think that there's some residue that is still left from apartheid, and we see that in our education system. What would you say are some of the residues that you still see are being prevalent in our society, and what can we do about these things?
Thank you, Ndavi. I have to start by congratulating you on becoming Miss SA, and a very well-deserved appointment.
Thank you so much, Prof.
And secondly, congratulations on this initiative. It is much needed. In your video, which I hope will be quoted 50 years from now, as was the case with Pixley Kaseme, who around your age gave a speech at Columbia University in America about Africa and how Africa was going to regenerate. And he said the world had given everyone arms and a whole lot of other things. But Africa was going to give the world what? A sense of being reminded that we're human because we're human together. Shared humanity. And that's what you've shown, and I'm certain that people like Pixley Kaseme, Charlotte McDaniel, Olive Schreiner, etc. will be proud of you. So the first thing is we've already indicated that many of the students do not have schools, good schools, close to where they live. So that's the starting point. Incidentally, yesterday we were at a conference on prostitution, and one of the things they pointed out was that this having to go to the city or a different suburb or a different town for an education exposes children to violence, long hours in taxis, lack of adult supervision in terms of homework, etc. So much as I'm glad it worked well for you, but I'm more glad that you are bringing the facilities to each school by making sure that all schools have high quality teachers. Laboratories, there's still children that only begin to see a lab when they come to the universities. Computers, a lot of our students at universities start using a computer when they come to university. During COVID-19, a lot of children had to use cell phones to study. So those are the kinds of disparities. And of course, you've also, in your video, touched on period poverty. That's another problem. Girls missing school days because they don't have pads and other sanitary facilities. And I'm glad that you're taking up this one. And then hopefully, if your campaign succeeds, we don't have to climb Kilimanjaro to raise pads anymore. But until then, we will continue to do that. And I would say it's all of those things. It's facilities, it's the quality of teachers, the quality of teaching, and digital inclusion.
Thank you so much for that, Prof. And I love that you touched on that digital space. I think COVID really showed us that there is a big disparity and a big inequality between the things that people have in the less privileged areas versus in the higher schools. And I think we got to see that we really need to be moving forward together. So I'm going to pass on this question to you, Gledo. We've seen that at tertiary level, a lot of the first years from underprivileged schools really struggle to keep up with the pace, specifically because a lot of them have not seen a computer by the time that they get there. What are some of the other challenges that you have seen pertaining that, and what do you think that we can do to also address that, and what are you doing as an SRC president looking at that specifically?
Thank you for having us. I saw you running a campaign to raise 6 million. I think you're going to be able to achieve that. There's many companies out there, black or white, corporate, and also institutions that have been established that are willing to donate. They donated to us as vets. in the beginning of the year when we had the issues of students who couldn't register. So would love for you to come and vet and so that we can further that dream. But obviously, tapping into your question, look, majority of first years are obviously disadvantaged, and the ones that are disadvantaged are those that are coming from public schools, and majority either emakas in the townships or emakaya in the rural areas. And this is where we see that the current system it is not really working, because those that are private schools have all this form of access, be it computers, better knowledge, better understanding, and there is a requirement for you to have a better understanding or be able to write English when you enter these institutions. So the first issue is to address the disparities and the differences that exist in the lower education from high schools to primary schools. The issue of public schools and private schools needs to be scrapped out. The same goes for hospitals. But I want to go into your question. I think within universities have made a huge progress, because all first years when they come, there's a program we take them through. It's called FYE, and also Adopt Your First Year. So we teach them how to use computers. And because they are required to be at university, I think around 3 of January, and usually the academic year will start around Feb, so they are given a month to sort of adapt, and even after the schools have sort of opened, we still teach them how to use the libraries, how to use all these new systems. So I think the universities are sort of putting an effort to try and resolve the issue. But majority of the issues that I think are faced by students right now is the issue of funding. The issue of funding is creating so much chaos in the country. Not so long ago, there was a Fees Must Fall movement that said, can we have free education in our country? And the government made a call where they announced that there is free education, but we see that it's not there. NSFAS is no longer working. There's now a huge number of matriculants that are passing in high numbers. Universities don't have space. Last year at VETS, they only wanted 4,000 first years. And usually they will accept, they will get applications around 88,000, right? And then within that 88,000, because maybe they thought, okay, maybe majority of them might not qualify. And it happened that they passed in high numbers. And then when they came to it, someone comes with 7 distinction, they're told that they don't have a space. Whereas they applied, they were accepted. So we have the issue of capacity. And how we then dealt with the issue of capacity was that now the universities need to move online. Universities moving online, that means we could now accept around 6,000 to 7,000 first years, because some can study online. Those that are able to use computers, have been in private schools, are able to use all the systems. But now there's an issue of ESCOM. When there's no electricity, the network can't function. The network systems of university, the country get disturbed. Some of the computers, they need life support. So these are some of the burning issues, and you've already highlighted some of the issues that I think universities are dealing with. At VETS, for example, this year we went on a pen drive, and now we're launching vending machines for pen drive, and they're for free. They are going to be launched in residencies. And this is the motto we're doing. The same way condoms are free, the same way should pens be free for females. Thank you.
There's so much that you touched on just in your answer, and I think it just really shows that there is a lot of layers to the issue of education. It's not just about the things that we can talk about in a textbook. The fact that you mentioned ESCOM as well, that is a big issue that a lot of students are facing. And I think I would just like to pass on the next question then to Ms. President over there. How would you say load shedding has affected you and your education?
Well, oh yes, it's okay. Thanks for the question.
You don't have load shedding now.
Well, load shedding it is affecting whenever it comes to studying, because it is not all of us, or majority of people do not have access to power supporters, for example, what do you call generators, and solars and etc. So by that being said, a person will be forced to use candles as the supporter for them to carry on reading. And using candle, there's a lot of possibilities that a person can, while he or she's reading, can doze off. And while he or she's reading, can doze off, there's a lot of possibilities that accidents can happen. Of course, we are living in underprivileged communities. If one house can be burned, majority of them will be affected too. So I can say that it is affecting so much, but why it's affecting like that, each and everyone can just do it if they want to, and if they are telling themselves that they can do so. How? Because we do know, and we are being warned about this load shedding thing, which means during the day you must do a very serious introspection on your books just to cover up at the time of afternoon. Thank you.
We can see that our youth is determined. What he's already said is that he's adapting to the problem. And I think that is something that we see in our youth generally. We can trace it back to before democracy, where our youth really fought for their rights to learn. Even now, as you mentioned, there was the riots for fees must fall because our youth really wants to learn. And I think that should make it so much more urgent for us to ensure that they don't have to fight for their education. It's a basic right. Our youth shouldn't be adapting to the problems. We should create, making it easy for them to learn so that we can build our own society. So I'm really inspired by the fact that you do want to adapt, but at the same time, I think there's still a lot of change that we need to make. And speaking of period poverty, I think I would just like to go this side to the women, the ladies, and anyone of you can take this one. How would you say, or what do you think makes it so important to ensure that women do feel safe and also do feel dignified in the classrooms? Because we've had so many issues where educators are actually the perpetrators to women's safety in classrooms. So I don't know if you guys have anything to say on that.
I believe that it is of utmost importance that every woman feels dignified when getting an education. And being clean when it comes to sanitary towels is very important, and it helps us to feel comfortable in a learning space. It does not make you feel ashamed in that you do not feel clean. You feel that people can see that you are on your periods. So yes, I feel that it is important that women have proper sanitary towels so that they can be able to focus in class, so that they can be able to concentrate without feeling any sort of shame. I mean, being on your period is natural and there's nothing shameful about it.
Absolutely. I have to agree with that. You? Can you guys hear me?
I believe that educating kids from young as they are from primary school will go a long way, because I believe there are kids that start going on the periods and they're shocked. They're like, what is this?
Yeah.
And I believe that if you start educating them from there, then you teach them about sanitary pads, you teach them about how to use it, about other options besides sanitary pads, other cheaper options such as your cups and it goes a long way, because when they grow up, it's they learn to be clean, and also teach the boys, because then they can respect the girls, and when an accident happens, then it's not a shock and they don't mock the girls because there's an accident that happened.
Yeah.
So when they grow up to be ladies that are clean, and they'll all understand and respect each other, because they understand that this is nature, it happens, and all of that.
Yeah, okay. You, Charmaine, do you have an input on that conversation? Okay, that's fine. So I think something that also stood out for me now, as you mentioned about teaching the boys, it is so important. I think what we have seen in our society is that more women are standing in leadership positions, and I think sometimes it makes it very difficult for the boy child to understand where they stand. And so it's so important for us to also speak to the boys, to make them understand the role of a woman. And I think to a certain extent it's our problem that we've created by not showing them what the role of a woman is. You cannot box a woman to the kitchen anymore. It is something of the past. You cannot box a woman to a less valuable position anymore. We all belong, we're all equal. And I think for me it's so important that we ensure that men know that the presence of a woman's power does not mean the absence of their own. We can coexist in authority. And so Prof, as a great woman of leadership, you've got so many accolades behind your name. How would you say we have shifted in society towards creating more leadership positions for women? And if we can do better, where do you think we can do better to create more leadership spaces for women?
Thank you. I'm sorry. I think we've come a long way. The very fact that we have you, young women, feeling you have a voice to talk to all of us and direct how the country should move forward and how the rest of the world should move forward. So I think that's an improvement. But there's two critical areas where we've improved. One is legal equality, what we call de facto equality. A girl cannot be discriminated from any leadership position because a girl, a woman, etc. So we've got legal equality. We also have political equality in that women can aspire to any political office. Of the 3 young women that I met, 2 of them were here. One wants to be a politician, one wants to be a scientist, and one wants to be a lawyer, of the 3 that young ones that I spoke about. So that's an opportunity to do something, because the law and the politics of the country enable you, and all of that comes because of our constitution. It's one of the greatest constitutions in the world. And you can lead in any field. You can lead in science, you can lead in law. Our Deputy Chief Justice is a woman in this space here. However, here's the gap. All animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. But legally, we're all equal. Legally, any girl can aspire for any leadership position. But based on what you said in the video and right now, for others there are these invisible obstacles. Even just the ability to get to university requires money. That's why we started Fees Must Fall. I mean, that's why, no, I didn't start Fees Must Fall. That's why they started Fees Must Fall. We started Action for Inclusion, and we made sure that at the university where I am, nobody is ever kicked out because of fees, or nobody does not graduate because of fees. The other issue is gender-based violence, because to lead equally, you have to have equal space, equal respect is, she said. Yeah. And that respect is still not there, which means social equality is still lacking. Yeah. Economic equality is still lacking. And I think just based on the restitution conference we had yesterday, was that on race, on gender, LGBTQI, and on class, the greatest challenges are social equality. Mm-hmm. And how do we see each other? Do we really see each other as fully humans? Mm-hmm. You see something right now that you don't have to box a woman into any space, but people do box women into spaces, which means socially we still need to move. And economically, because yes, we're all called upon to lead, but often money stands in the way.
I think the issue of funding is one that is prevalent, and even though we do have a national scheme, we have NSFAS, as he said, sometimes it's not functioning, sometimes the payment is delayed. I myself was on NSFAS and I've experienced that, finding that exclusion, certain accommodations won't let you in because you haven't paid, but NSFAS is supposed to do that. I remember there was an incident earlier on this year where one of the students was sleeping outside of the university because they got kicked out of that accommodation. And so it's such an important conversation to have about the funding, because the funds are there. I don't think it's an issue of is the money there. It's a matter of the allocation, the distribution of the money. Is it going to the right places? Is it going there timelessly? And I would just like to engage with our girls on this side. You guys are in matric, right? And you have plans of moving forward. And so I would just like to know from you guys, what are your aspirations? Do you want to go to university? And if so, what are some of the challenges or what are some of the obstacles that you think you may face transitioning from high school into university?
I would like to study BCom Law in the following year at the University of Pretoria. And I think in terms of challenges, we should look at handling the workload and being able to cope with all the workload, even amidst like the technology and ESCOM. It's such a challenge to aspire to learn and to have an education with all these outside challenges. Yeah.
If I can add, I would love to study occupational therapy next year. But the sad thing is they only accept 50 people in the faculty. And the sad thing about the private schools that I are in, it's a great education. I can't complain. I have great infrastructures, but the marks that we get in grade 11 are lower than the government schools. So the marks we go to get to the university are lower, and we don't get into the first 50. So that's the sad thing for me. Just I will only get next year January. Where will I study? I don't know. I don't have a plan. At the moment, I'll go to Turkey and study BSc, but I don't know where I'm going now, and that's a big struggle for me.
Yeah, I think the issue of capacity and timing is really something that is standing out within the transition from high school into university. And I'll come back to you then to say that as the SRC president, what are some of the challenges that you've seen with regards to transitioning in itself? Not necessarily when they're already there, but the transition. What is that jump? What are the challenges there?
Thank you. I think because majority of the people tend to have to leave their homes and come into the city. Majority of first years don't even know how to cook, but we have DH. And it's my understanding that not all universities have dining halls, DH. And then also a simple transition. The moment NSFAS comes in, or you're on Funza, or whatever bazar that you are on, you have to support at home. And you're trying to buy clothes for yourself so that you can fit into the space. Because there's something about being dignified, about feeling comfortable within the space you're in, so that you can properly focus. Majority of our students have to support their parents at home, they have to support their siblings. So majority of the time they don't have money. But then how we deal with that as the universities, and I'll speak for vets, we have what you call the vets food bank, where we donate food, but mostly we donate money, and then we buy either food parcels or we buy toiletries, whatever you can think of, and then students can go there and collect. So that makes some of the challenges during transition to be simple. And because not everyone qualifies for NSFAS, there is what you call the missing middle. The missing middle, those that are too rich to be on NSFAS, but they're too poor to afford fees in institutions of higher learning. Majority of them during the transition, you find them sleeping in the libraries. That's very painful. These are first years. Majority of the times it's student organizations and some other clubs and societies that have to feed them. Now we must make sure that they have access to the gym so that they can shower and all that. So it makes the transition itself difficult. Imagine you don't have a conducive place to sleep and you're expected to have completed specific readings. Where you are sleeping, it's the lab. It's a computer lab where other students are cross-nighting and you should be sleeping next day. So there is that challenge. And I think another thing is the education around LGBTQI community. Majority of our first years when they are transitioning, particularly when you're from townships and Emakai, it's your first time to even hear about such politics. I think universities haven't appreciated that, to say that there is a gap and they need to educate. Each and every first year, it must be mandatory that when they come in, they're educated. Because then later on, when you have all these incidents, and then someone comes and says, but I didn't know. And you are in that position to say, but now someone has been either assaulted or has been offended. And you're in a position of someone who's coming from a place where they say, I didn't know. I never thought anything like this exists. So in terms of transition, there's a gap there. I think either the Department of Higher Education has to play. But I want to deviate a little bit and touch on what Prof touched on. I think our constitution is said to be one of the greatest, but it's failing to address simple things. And I will highlight two things now because of time. So the first thing that I would like to highlight, the issue of private hospitals and public hospitals. It's a disgrace in the country. Those that have money or that are close to whiteness have access, they're able to afford the private hospitals. And when you enter a private hospital, when you are sick, you leave. The place itself gives you life. And then when you enter Hillbrook Clinic, you enter Charlotte Private, you see some of the places that it kills you. It kills you, and the Constitution is failing to deal with such. Had we had a level playing field where we don't even have the differences I mentioned about public schools and private schools, the differences that exist between private hospitals and public hospitals. The fact that today we still have gated communities have all the advantages you can think of. It's still the same systems that we had during apartheid. The likes of your waterfall, the likes of your Orania, I can mention them. They have so many advantages to a point that even today when they are doing censorship, counting population, they don't count people within some of these gated communities. So the Constitution is failing to address those simple things. Therefore, it's definitely not one of the best. But it does, in general, it does offer people general rights to exist. The only issue is that what are freedoms if you can't find a job? What are freedoms if you can't have access to land and what is rightfully yours? Thank you.
How would you like to give a comment on that?
Ndavi, I would like to comment on this. I protect and defend the Constitution not because I was one of the drafters, but because I'm a constitutional expert, and I think it is wrongly accused. No constitution delivers a hospital. No constitution delivers a residential plan of action. The Constitution delivers the picture of the country we want to become. And that is in the preamble to the Constitution. That's why at Stellenbosch University, the law school has a preamble, which is getting law students to understand when you interpret any law, start with what you saw at the door when you came to the university. And then we also introduce them to the Constitution when they arrive at the university. And of course, I'm sure people would say, oh, how about somebody peed on someone? When students have just arrived, they're a product of society. And of course, to suggest that what people do or don't do is purely because of the institution is lack of systems thinking. But that's not the defense. So we educate people on that because the Constitution starts with the purpose or with the picture of society. That's the vision of the preamble. Secondly, the second thing is the principles. And they're clearly there in the values in section 1 of the Constitution, chapter 2. All of the rights, when you're talking about health right, you have the right to access to health. And lastly, the Constitution is very clear about how all of this must work together, what kind of state must deliver this. And if you have a good plan for this building. The architects did a good job. Like if you look at UNISA, the architect did a good job. Then you bring a guy who was building rotables at Ndavi's village, the SLK said, built this building. A lot of people don't even look at the plan. And I met one person who was extremely senior in this country, and because it's not to embarrass that person, but I was shocked because I met this person. I had a conversation with him a few weeks before the end of his tenure, and then he said, my sister, I've never read the Constitution. I rely on these people who advise me, and they advise me wrongly. So if leaders are not reading the Constitution, they're wrong in claiming it. So you've got a Constitution as a general framework. It gives you a macro picture, not a micro. Then we have a medium between macro and micro, which are laws. Do you know, say that the Equality Act, which was passed with Mandela himself breathing down our necks, still remains unimplemented fully. Passed 22 years ago. Chapter 5 of that act required ministers to audit their sector, which would be now the hospital sector, the school sectors, and look at what's wrong that reflects the imbalances of the past and put forward a plan of action. They didn't do that. And then many of them, now that they're looking for higher office, they're blaming the Constitution. It's not to blame.
I think a general overview is that there is quite a disconnect between what the Constitution says and the implementation thereof. And that can come from a lack of understanding of it, but also just no knowledge of it, or ignorance even, because I do think that to a certain extent we should all have some knowledge of the Constitution. But at the same time, I think it's the responsibility from the top to ensure that learners actually know what is within the Constitution, so that even when they are growing up and going into educational places, tertiary level, they also know the things that are out there for them, because they are aware of what the Constitution states to protect them, and so that they can also stand up for their own rights and also for other people's rights. You touched on such an important point. I remember myself as well in 2019, I was supposed to go and write a test on campus, so sometimes we have evening tests. And we actually striked as the learners because it was right after there was the Uyinene, what happened with Uyinene. So we were also fearful. We couldn't even go to write a test. Firstly, mentally, we were traumatized because you can relate. As women, we can relate. We can understand also what the family is feeling. And then secondly, just the fear that this could be you. You know, it's not even a conversation about what was she wearing, why was she alone. These are not questions we should be asking. So that matter of safety is really also setting a lot of women back in their education. And this is not only happening outside of school, this is happening inside classrooms. There was an incident where a teacher assaulted a child, and what they did was just move him to a different school. How is that solving the problem when you're moving the perpetrator from one school to another? That is no way to solve a problem. It is time that we put more stringent things that will ensure that these men stop to do this, because it really isn't only about the physical rape to the body, but also mentally. We fear going out into the public. Every day I'm happy that I'm a survivor. You know, I can't only be a survivor each and every day. That is something that we really need to talk about in our country. I see we have the SRC president from UP. Thank you so much for joining us. I also want to pose the next question to you, and we have spoken about extramural activities, we've spoken about safety for women in education, we've spoken about the transition into university and those challenges. What are some of the challenges that you would say women specifically are facing, and for you as an SRC president in leadership, what are some of the things that you're doing to ensure that actually women don't have to face these things anymore?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone, and apologies for arriving late. Thank you very much for the warm welcome, and congratulations on the title as Miss South Africa. So challenges that females particularly females from underprivileged backgrounds face when they enter institutions of higher learning. You often come into a space where some female students literally just come with their suitcases. A student would come from Eastern Cape, a student would come from Soweto, a student would come from wherever. They come with their suitcases, they have nowhere to sleep. They literally just get to the campus gates. You're a student leader, I'm sure you can attest to this. It happens almost all the time during registration period. So female students often find themselves in situations where they are forced to do certain things because at this point I don't have a place to sleep. There's just this guy offering me a place to sleep. I don't know anyone, I don't have a cell phone. So those are some of the things that female students encounter at the beginning of the year, and we've also experienced such things at the University of Pretoria. And one of the things that we as student leaders do, and this is what political structures as well do, is we have what we call help desk. For SASCO, it's Right to Learn. For EFF, it's Sizofunda Nengani, where you play that middleman, the bridge between management and the student, where you assist with getting students residences as soon as they arrive, because obviously student leaders know the relevant people, even in emergency times. There are churches that also assist with emergency cases. But outside of residence issues as well, there are issues of financial access. So registration fees, for example. There are some students that at the beginning of the year you're still waiting for NSFAS to confirm if you funded or not. And if NSFAS hasn't confirmed, you cannot register. And imagine a student that has left wherever they've left with their suitcase. They cannot register, means that they cannot be placed in rest. So those are some of the challenges that female students face upon entering institutions of higher learning for the very first time.
Thank you so much for that. And I think that's why these conversations are so important for us to have and why we are launching this campaign today. We're going to expand on the conversations that we have. We will go into detail with this different things such as career advice, the LGBTQ, because we do realize that we have to educate separately on all these issues, because at the end of the day, when they all come together, that is what we call education. It is everything that affects us as human beings. So we'll definitely continue with that. Our last comment from Prof, and then I'll just like to wrap up.
Thank you, Ndavi, and thank you to the Miss SA organization. Firstly, it's a privilege to be part of this, but I also see a huge ripple effect of what you're doing, because it's ed-led. One of the challenges we've heard is Stellenbosch University and Tuma Foundation is everyone coming to us and saying no, because the majority of the people that are coming are the missing middle, as the SRC president would said. And I know you're aiming for 6 million. I'm praying that we raise 60.
Yes.
Sure. The problem is huge. And what has emerged in this room that I hope we all take into account is we are not equal. The law requires us to achieve equality. So the Constitution says everyone is equal under the law. However, Section 9(2) says equality includes equal enjoyment of all rights and freedoms. And I hope there's nobody in this room who believes that there's equal enjoyment of all the rights and freedoms. I'm talking de facto, practically. And then the Constitution says measures may be taken to advance equality. And I think in 28 years of democracy, we made one mistake, that we thought everything would be done by government. And then we then say government has failed. Where are the resources? They are with people. When apartheid and colonialism made us unequal, I'll give you Stellenbosch as an example. Kamandi is one farm. All of the black people, the Africans, live there, one farm. All of the others that are commercial farms were given to one family. Yesterday we had a lovely farm and we got all of the resources for free. It's one family's farm. Kayamandi, one farm, everyone there like in a tinned fish. That was done by colonialism and apartheid, and we have not dismantled it. Cutersville, we had Mr. Clark telling us they're still living in that confined space that they were at 28 years ago. Ida's Valley, we had Ian Hendricks telling us that stuff. So the inequalities in universities, in ECDC centers, and at high school are so because of the inequalities in society. So we cannot fix the inequalities at universities without fixing the inequalities in society. But what you are doing, though, you are understanding the African saying that says, if you think you're too small to make a difference, think of a mosquito. So when I'm saying we have to fix broader society, I don't mean don't fix individual cases. Me and you are here because education pushed us. In my case, my parents could only take me up to grade 10. So total strangers paid for the rest of it. So let's fix the system. But my ask to South Africa is, if you are rich, you must know that it's partly because your parents worked hard, but partly because they were given an advantage. That's the truth, plainly. And we get generational wealth transferred over and over again, and then we get generational poverty transferred from generation to generation. And we can sit here and say the ANC government is not doing anything, or if you are in the Western Cape, you can say the DA government is not doing anything. I don't know if anybody else is governing somewhere else, you can blame them. It's not going to help. What will help is us coming together and going to government and saying, this is where we see the problem, this is how we can work together. And yesterday, we acknowledged Louise van Rey, who I hope will work with you, Ndavi, because we'd love to say, we'll want to work with Miss S.A., because you're solving the country's problem, whereas we could only start where we are. Of course, the parents were working with the whole problem. But Louise, who won the Bridge Builder Award, did not ask who created this problem and who's going to benefit from it. And which government is going to look back if the problem persists. She just realized schools were struggling, and she brought together CEO of successful companies to come and partner with principals of struggling schools. And it did two things. One was leadership development, but second one was resources. Because if somebody in Kamandi calls for a fundraising meeting, who comes to that fundraising event? It's people who are going to put 2,000 rand, well, not 2,000 rand, 200 rand. I went to, just one last thing, I went to a colored community where they had an auction to raise money to train boys. There are movements for boys without fathers. And they were auctioning, and the highest bid was a huge Nelson Mandela painting. And that was by me, because the auctioneer just pushed me, abused my presence, and I got it for 11,000. Huge house size. And a few months later, I went to an auction where women in Stellenbosch who do painting as a hobby were auctioneering. We auctioned. The highest sold was a small thing like that. It was 15,000. What apartheid did, what colonialism did, what Patrick has done, and all of these odious injustices of the past was to transfer social capital to one group, extract it from one group to the other. So we're unequal now, not because the Constitution says so, not because the law says so, because we're failing to apply the Constitution to dismantle the inequalities in social and economic capital. But no law can change people who are not willing to change. I think this country will change when people like Louis Van Rijn, like Ndavi, and others realize I am privileged. But I'm privileged because it took a village to place me where I am. And the burden of privilege is to expand it to other people. So Charlotte McKenzie would be so proud of you. If you can rise, bring someone with you.
Thank you so much, Professor. I really appreciate those encouraging words. I really needed to hear that, and I think a lot of us sometimes look at ourselves and ask ourselves, who am I to make a difference? But who are you not to make a difference? Start where you are with what you have. You don't know who you are touching. You don't know the ripple effect that can come from that one person that you are impacting. So with that said, today's conversation was very packed, and I think for me, my biggest takeaway was that education really is a deeper conversation than we think it is. It is about everything that affects us as people and not just what we're getting when we get to a classroom. So let us continue to have these conversations, and I would like to call on everybody in the room, all the big corporates, to partner up with me so that we can continue the conversation, so that we can raise that 6 million rand or 60, as Prof said, because we can do it. We can implement these changes. We are here filled, in a room filled of people who are willing to implement these programs, who are willing to walk forward with this campaign. So partner up with me, and I believe that we will help to edunite our country. Thank you so much.